Hello and welcome to the WBG VGC Power Rankings. This is going to be for the Darkness Division, the lowest division in our league. I am Kreem, one of the admins, moderators of the server, and I'm going to be going through these rankings. We're going to be starting with the team in last place and going all the way up to first. So if you want to see who the most powerful teams that we believe are, stick around until the end. So, first of all, coming in at 16, we have Ninja Warrior. So, this team is very top heavy. So, first of all, you'll notice that they have very top heavy redirectors in DDF and Togekiss, which both overlap in a lot of roles that you're going to have them play. So, it makes this team easier to prep for. If you have a lot of overlapping mons. And then you have Urshifu S, a very powerful mon, and then Reggie Weezing. So very top heavy. Pretty much like at least like 3 of these mons are probably going to be coming every game. And then you pretty much have 4 mons under 4 points, which feel very niche roles. And frankly aren't very good. Urshifu doesn't really have a lot of like very powerful partners either here. It's just kind of there. Doesn't like synergize very well with the rest of the team. However, this team, it's still pretty good. None of these teams I'd say are like very bad. You can still win with this team for sure. Obviously, like I said, it's very top heavy, but that's not like necessarily a bad thing, especially if you know how to use a lot of these lower tier mons very well. You're able to mix up your opponent and hit them with things that you're not expecting. And then the combination of neutralizing gas and intimidate can also be very deadly if you're able to use it properly. And then obviously the Weezing Reggie core is very powerful. So this team definitely does still have a lot going for it. Next of all, we have Benfisk. So the main problem with this team is going to be its type coverage. So you'll notice that there are 3 fighting types: Urshifu, Blaziken, and Heracross. There are also 3 water types: Urshifu, Dreadnought, and Swampert. And you'll also notice that Dreadnought and Swampert both share a 4 times weakness to grass, which is not ideal. So obviously having like not the best type coverage isn't like the end of the world. You can probably draft monotype, and if you're good enough at the game, you'd still be able to win. But just having like that ease for your opponent that they don't have to run like a lot of coverage moves makes it a lot easier to prep for. It also doesn't have very good speed control, considering that pretty much the only thing it would have is Trick Room Cresselia, which Trick Room and Cresselia are both very powerful. However, you have to keep in mind that Trick Room is like one of the things that has one of the most counters in the game. With things like Taunt, you have things like Trick Assault Vest, you have things like Imprison, you have opposing Trick Room bonds, and even people can bring opposing Trick Room sweepers, or if it's not using Trick Room into the first place. So it's not very reliable overall as just like your only form of speed control. However, this does have like a pretty bulky mode that's going to be decently difficult to break. With mons like Togekiss, Cresselia, and Luxray, all with very high defensive capabilities. And so it's definitely still not going to be like the easiest thing to deal with. Another weakness here is that you don't have like too many options when it comes to Dynamax sweepers and candidates. You have Urshifu, you have like Blaziken maybe. You have Blacephalon if you really want to risk it, but Blacephalon's pretty frail, so you probably won't max it a lot. I'm not very good at this, but yeah, you don't really have a lot of like Dynamax sweeper candidates here. but it still has a lot of good options in terms of like its bulkiness, as I previously mentioned. All right, so next we have Tyler. So this draft is pretty much dedicated to helping Glastrier and Stack Attack a sweep, having Oranguru for Trick Room, Amoonguss for redirection, which is one of the best redirectors in the game. And then you have Sableye and Pheromosa, both with things that are going to allow you to move faster than your opponents even outside of Trick Room, with Pheromosa having things like Speed Swap and Sableye having things like Prankster and Thunderwave. However, the problem here is that this entire part of the draft basically doesn't exist. And it's very unlikely that like these mons are going to be coming to games regularly. Chances are you're going to be pretty much exclusively using these this top half of the team. And one thing that you might also notice is that bulky water types pretty much go in here. This team doesn't really have too much to hit water types with, unless you want to run like offensive Amoonguss, which you are most likely not doing. But besides that, if you're able to defeat Glastrier Stack Attacker like in the same on, or even with two separate Pokemon, then it's very likely that you'll just be able to defeat their main sweeper and then just kind of win by default. However, Glastrier and Stack Attacker are still very powerful, and in the hands of a good player, it's still very possible to win with a team like this, especially with Amoonguss. No skill. Okay, so next up you have me. So basically, I tried to draft all of the frogs. However, I didn't realize that that was going to be really expensive. And so I have a very top-heavy team, which is quite unfortunate. A Bronzor is pretty much the most viable of my budget picks, which isn't saying a good thing. I also somehow managed to draft a team that has no fake out, which is very impressive. You can't tell from this because for some reason it doesn't work, which is also quite unfortunate. And my only speed control really is in the form of like Swift Swim, Seismitoad, or Chlorophyll Venusaur. Uh, so overall, my team just has like a lot of gaps in it. But hey, I have like 3 out of 4 frogs, so that's pretty cool. So next we have Ant. I can read. Next we have Spider. So in terms of offense, your main offensive mons are going to be Thunderous and Dracovish. Obviously, I'm not saying that like these other mons are unviable as offensive things, but they pretty much get far outclassed by Thunderous and Dracovish. And they're going to be pretty much your main like sweepers and main Dynamax candidates. You have Clefable, Hippowdon, and Registeel as a really good like defensive core, and they do really good supporting Thunderous and Dracovish. Clefable being able to have redirection, and just all of its dumb shenanigans. Hippowdon with sand and good spread moves to help speed up Dracovish, and then Registeel being incredibly bulky. And if your opponent tries to focus on something like your Thunderous or Dracovish, then you can set up on them with things like Iron Defense and Body Press. And if they try to focus on the Registeel, then obviously you still have your powerful offensive ones next to it. So this can be a pretty deadly combo. And then you also have Arcanine, which decreases the damage you're taking even more. So overall, this is pretty good. However, Executor, the Hitmonchan, I do not know what these are going to do for this team. Same thing with Miltank. They seem to just be budget picks. Uh, and then you also have Zoroark and Shed Ninja, which are both very situational bonds. Shed Ninja obviously being like the main, it's a very gimmicky thing. Uh, and Rock Slide just kind of invalidates it. And on this team, you're going to be using Goggle Shed Ninja a lot probably because of Hippowdon Sandstream. Uh, so it's not going to be living hits twice with Focus Sash. And then Zoroark as well, a very situational thing that you're pretty much only going to be using if you're like very confident that you're going to be able to get into your opponent's head. So next up we have Ant Bulbasaur. So this draft is very good. However, it lacks a lot of synergy. Unzicon and Latios is very powerful and has a very good core. However, it doesn't really work with too much else on the team in terms of like hyper offense, besides maybe like Farfetch'd Galar, which is Farfetch'd Galar. I do not think to see anything else about that. Then you have Butterfree and Volcarona, which are both very similar. They're both special setup sweeper bug types that are 4 times weak to rock. So the overlap bad. But yeah, these two obviously like they don't. Chances are you're not going to be bringing Butterfree and Volcarona into the same game, pretty much because they do like the same thing. Otherwise, besides that, it's very good, and this is also one of the few not top heavy teams in this draft. So you should take pride in that. This is a very nice team, better than mine. So next we have Steven. So this team is a very good defensive core, obviously, with Incineroar, Corviknight Gmax, and Rotom Wash. Some of the best defensive bonds in the game, and Incineroar being Incineroar. Tapu Lele on this team doesn't really synergize with much besides like Garchomp. Ditto, besides Garchomp. Sorry, I misspoke there. Ditto and Slowbro Galar are both pretty inconsistent, with Ditto hoping that you have to like transform into the right slot and also hoping that they send out the right mon that you want to transform into. And then Slowbro Galar with its quick draw ability being RNG based. Make them not like the best things. Especially Ditto, not having restrictors in this format is very bad for Ditto because it doesn't have like a dedicated target that you're going to be want to going into. Let's see. Fletchling, surprisingly. Oh, I was reading at the wrong team. I'm so good at this. But wait, no, it does say Fletchling. Where's Fletchling? Why did he write Fletchling? Why did I write? Okay. Uh, I'm sorry about that. 13-point Garchomp, a very powerful offensive Pokemon. That works well with the rest of this team. Forms a good fantasy core. It's just very good for this team. And then Silvally, being obviously like one of the most flexible ones in the format, with its RKS system ability, giving it basically any type it needs to have for any matchup, which makes it a pain to prep for. So yeah, overall this team is pretty solid. Next we have Always Bling Lag. So this team, obviously look at it, and the first thing that you're probably going to see is a great Trick Room mode. You have Hatterene and Duskull as Trick Room setters, Hatterene obviously being one of the best Trick Room Pokemon in the game. You have Snorlax, Marowak, and Vikavolt all as Trick Room sweepers, which is very powerful. Obviously, Snorlax, even out of Trick Room, can still be very powerful and hard to break due to its amazingly high HP, defense, and special defense stats. Well, I mean, its defense isn't the best, but its has a very high HP, and so it could still be very hard to break. Um, the thing about the trickery mode of this team is that Hatterene and Duskull both share a very common weakness, and that they're pretty frail. And so it's likely that your opponent is going to be able to just kill your Trick Room setter before you're actually able to use it. And as I mentioned before, Trick Room isn't really something that you want to rely on, as there's a lot of ways to counter it. However, even outside of this Trick Room, this team is still pretty strong. With Serena to destroy your opponent's priority moves. Naganadel, Cobalion, and Weavile are very fast mons, which allow you to work well outside of Trick Room. And then there's that Farfetch'd I was looking for before. I don't know why that was in the other section. But yeah, overall, this team is pretty solid as long as you play well with your Trick Room and your Trick Room setters. So next we have the one, the only Lichu, Link Pichu. This team has a lot of good value picks, I'd say, like Berserker, Kreem, Machamp. Pretty much like this entire part of the team. It was very balanced. It's very balanced and budgeted very well. However, one thing that you'll notice is that you pretty much have your only supports is Alcremie and Funius, which are low point mons for a reason, and that reason being that they aren't very good. Besides that, it's pretty strong. Obviously, offensively, you have T-Tar Draco's alt combo, you have Chandelure, and then Berserker, who is surprisingly strong, and then Salamence, and then defensively, T-Tar is decently bulky. You have Gastrodon, you have like Salamence. Is Salamence bulky? I don't even know, but I'm saying it is now. So yeah, overall, this team, it's very well balanced. The only thing really is to have great support, but hyper offense is a thing, and you can definitely make this team work. So now we have Sushi. This Sushi, similar to the last one, has a lot of very good value picks. It was budgeted very nicely, and it's pretty solid overall. The pretty much main and only form of speed control that you're going to have is Regieleki with Electro Web. So if you have an opponent who's able to counter that by either killing Regieleki or using things like Weather or Tailwind, then this team is going to have a hard time with speed control. But other than that, it's going to be very good. Colossal, it's really good here typing wise, but it doesn't really have like the best partners. The only thing that you're gonna have to proc Steam Engine is pretty much gonna be Seeking, which I find quite funny that you're gonna have Seeking alongside Colossal as one of your main offensive modes. Spiritomb isn't like the most reliable Pokemon, but it's very bulky, and its typing definitely gives it a very good advantage. Like my team, this does not have any fake out, which I don't know how you managed to do this, but I did as well, so I suppose I can't really criticize that very much. Spiritomb, it's decently good when it's able to get like Trick Room up as well. I forgot to mention that. But other than that, it's pretty fragile, with your main bulky picks going to be like Regidrago, and that's it. But other than that, this team is pretty well balanced. It's pretty good. So next we have the Legend Yahaddles, whose name is spelled correctly. So we're once again back to top-heavy teams. So we have Grimmsnarl, Rotom Heat, Tapu Fini, Celesteela. Score, very powerful. Obviously, it has a great mix of these defensive Pokemon, with all these being able to take hits very well. Support between Grimmsnarl Even Celesteela, I believe, can run decently good support sets. And then, can Celesteela run? I think I just made that up. Ignore that. Uh, and then, obviously, with Tapu Fini being very powerfully offensively, whether it's with substitute Calm Mind, just Calm Mind by itself, or even with no setup, Rotom being able to having access to Overheat, incredibly powerful move. So yeah, overall, its core is very powerful, and it's actually very flexible as well. Latios, Pikachu, Ninjask, Marowak, and Hitmontop are actually very good as well. Pikachu offering a form of speed control with its G-Max ability. Latios being a pretty good, pretty fast offensive mon that you're able to use. Hitmontop, as much as I hate to say it, is pretty good, having access to things like Wide Guard, Intimidate, and Fake Out. Ninjask, it's fast. Infiltrator is a pretty good ability because if your opponent is relying on frail mons of screens, and you're going to be able to break that very well with Ninjask, the great offensive threat of WBG, VGC. And Marowak, with it's very powerful with Lightning Rod being a form of like redirection that you have. And then you can also add Rockhead if you want power, or Battle Armor if you want to for some reason. It's very flexible, especially with the Thick Club item that it has access to. So this team is very flexible. And then you have Jigglypuff in Yamask. I don't know why it has that. The really like biggest flaw of this team is that it doesn't have too much in terms of like speed control. You're going to be relying on paralysis most of the time with Thunderwave Grimmsnarl and GMX Pikachu. But other than that, it's pretty powerful. It's very good. Now moving on to top 5. Starting us off, we have the Keckmeister. This team is very good. It's pretty. It's not the best. Or okay, this is man talking. It's not very top heavy. It was pretty well budgeted with Cottonee pretty much being like the only like super budget pick on this team. And also Jaclopi, but it's funny, so it doesn't count. Dracoki definitely feels very out of place here. I'm not quite sure what it's going to do here. Lantern, again, very similar problem. It's a very decent Pokemon, but on this team, I'm not quite sure why it's here. Your guys, Duke, Jinx, all very good budget picks that allowed you to get higher point mons like Rillaboom, Cinderace, Tornadus, and Primarina. You have Crocodile for Intimidate, one of the best abilities. However, your only really like special attacking Dynamax candidate is going to be Primarina. So if you're able to use things like Burn and Intimidate, then you're going to have to rely on Primarina, which can be like an exploitable tactic. So next, coming in at number 4, we have Draco Gar, the Man of the Rain. Unsurprisingly, after his performance last season, he has once again decided to draft Rain. Pretty much this whole part of the team, Rillaboom, Pelipper, Kingdra, Ferrothorn, and Entei, are all great Rain Pokemon. Gudra as well can also function in Rain. You have Armaldo with its Swift Swim ability also allowing it to go in Rain. So this Rain was very powerful. However, it also can work well out of Rain with things like Pincurchin, Doublade, and Morpeko. Morpeko being surprisingly powerful, and so is Pincurchin. Do not underestimate them. I beg you. You will get swept by Pincurchin and Morpeko if you underestimate them, and people will laugh at you. It's very top heavy though. Obviously, with this great Rain core. it's pretty expensive, which is a common flaw, as you've probably seen so far. There are not many max candidates that you have either, besides like Rillaboom, Kingdra, and Gudra, which can be very exploitable if you're able to defeat them before they're able to Dynamax or cripple them in Dynamax with things like Paralysis and Burning. However, other than that, it's a very powerful, it's a very solid team. Draco Gar is a very skilled rain player, so I have no doubt that he's going to be able to use this very well. And unlike his Season 1 team, he's actually going to not bring the same few mons, and I think these lower tier books look very promising. I'm interested to see how he's going to do. So now we have Fluffy. These top 5 Pokemon, Metagross, Clefairy, Spectre, Talonflame, Porygon Z, is pretty much like the best. Does this count as a core? It's quite large for a core, but this is pretty much one of the best sets of Pokemon in the entire league. And even after that, it still has threats like Mienshao, Excelgor, as much as I hate to admit it, Palosan, and yeah, so that's very powerful with a lot of viable Pokemon on this team, even with its incredibly powerful, like more top-heavy half. This team, though, does seem to have a pretty hard time dealing with Trick Room, which is quite unfortunate considering that we've covered a decent amount of Trick Room teams today. This can be outplayed. Obviously, you have like Intimidate cycling with Krillfish and Scraggy. So if your opponent's relying on physical Trick Room sweepers, then that's one way that you can possibly stall them out. And as I mentioned before, Trick Room, it's not like the hardest thing to prep for, in my opinion. So yeah, overall, this team is very powerful with its like more top-heavy core and then viable budget picks. Coming in number 2, our penultimate PR, I suppose, is NickSC. So this team it's very well designed, it's very well budgeted. Pretty much everything here like has a role and makes sense. You obviously have like a very strong like slow Trick Room mode with things like Rhyperior, Turtonator, and Bronzong, which are also incredibly bulky. You have Moltres G and Company, which is a great core. It's one of the best combos in the game. And you can do a lot of things surprisingly with Moltres Comfy. And Berserk again being a very powerful ability that you can definitely exploit for yourself with things like Comfy's Heal Pulse. And then he even has the option to not bring it, which can definitely mess you up if you over prep for it. The fast mode is also very strong, however, it has a problem of being quite frail. Manectric M, I'm smartest man alive. Luxio and Meowstic, very powerful. They're very good budget picks. Meowstic, obviously, having things like Prankster and good support sets. And then Luxio, I'm not quite sure what Luxio does. In all honesty, I do not believe that Luxio fits with this team very well. And Meowstic has decent overlap with things like Comfy and Togepi. However, I think it should still be able to define itself decently well. So yeah, overall, this team is very good. Now, finally, coming in at number 1, we have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Dasa VGC. So first of all, he has Colossal. That's Colossal. He has Dragapult. I don't know what else I need to say. Now, not only has he drafted Dragapult, but you somehow allowed him to draft Dragapult and Colossal G-Max, making for a very, very scary, very scary core. Pretty much anything on this team can be a threat, either offensively or defensively, which is amazing. You have options with everything. Obviously, Dragapult being one of the most versatile things in draft allows it to support this entire team incredibly well. And honestly, the biggest problem with this team is going to be finding what strategy to use, just because there are so many things that you can do here. So that is our power rankings. I hope you enjoyed this. As I'm scrolling through, please do not mind how all of these things are slightly off. Lemuro is the one who wrote pretty much all of this, so make sure to give him credit. And I believe that's all I have. Have a nice day, I suppose.